Hi, welcome to another flipped classroom. This is Mr. Fitzpatrick. Today we're going to look at the Mycenaean Civilization, the civilization that followed the Minoans. First, let's begin by looking at a map and seeing what area in Greece we are speaking of. You see down here, this is where the Minoans were, in Crete. The Mycenaean Civilization encompasses Crete along with most of the mainland of Greece and many of the islands in the Aegean Sea. We're going to focus on the city of Mycenae. This is a drawing based on archaeological evidence and digs that were done many years ago. And one of the things that jumps out at us right away are the walls. When we looked at the Minoan civilization, there were no walls. This should tell us that there was somewhat of a fear of attack. It also can tell us that these people were a warrior-like people as compared to the Minoans, who were much more focused on trade. Now, as time goes on, the Mycenaeans will become focused on trade as well. They will start to adapt some of the civilized ways of the Minoans. Also inside of Mycenae is a citadel, or a main palace, and inside of that, a megaron, or a main hall. The head of the Mycenaean society was the Wanax, or the king. He was a warrior king, as these were warrior people. Landowners would exchange goods for protection, and they also developed a pretty strong navy as well. They needed this because Troy, just across the Aegean Sea, was probably a major trade rival, and as we'll see in a few days, we'll look at the Trojan War and the major conflict between the Mycenaeans and the Trojans. As far as their religion, they were polytheistic. We don't know a ton about the Mycenaean religion, other than they were probably had a sky god, which then led to the Greeks' interpretation of Zeus. But they also took on other gods and goddesses as well. For instance, they also worshipped the snake goddess, or the earth goddess, of the Minoan civilization, and there were priests in their society to guide them. As far as job specialization, there were warriors like we spoke of, but there were also priests and slaves and farmers. They kept records of inventory, land, deliveries, etc. Linear A was used by the Minoans, still not deciphered. Linear B was kind of taken from Linear A. However, it has been deciphered. You could probably see a little bit of actual Greek letters in there if you know any. Let's take a zoom in here and see if we can find any or point any out. You start to see what looks like a backward S here. We see other things that look similar to our alphabet. Pretty cool. Most of the stories were usually passed down by word of mouth, so most of what we find, like I said before, is record keeping. As we said before, Greece was extremely mountainous. So the farmland that was there was not a ton, and it didn't support all kinds of crops. Their biggest exports were grapes and olives, similar to that of the Minoans. The climate, like we said before, was a Mediterranean climate. Never got too cold in the wintertime, so crops really didn't fail that often. We saw this image before. We see how they designed their palaces. They were pretty technologically advanced. Their ships were also advanced like the Minoans. Archaeological digs have unearthed ivory carvings. The ivory would not have been found in Greece. That was probably imported from Africa. And they created these carvings, but then the same the same goes with their metalworking as well. A lot of the metal they found was made of gold. Now they would have had some gold mines, but it's doubtful that they had enough to create the amount of metalworking that has been found. So much of the gold is probably imported as well. They had plumbing. This may have been a toilet. They had plumbing back then, just like the Minoans did. Perhaps they got this idea from the Minoans. And if they had plumbing, they definitely had sewers as well. Another big piece of infrastructure, again, as we mentioned before, would be these walls. That would be a part of the infrastructure of the entire city. That should do it for now. Come on in tomorrow with your charts filled in, and we'll add to the chart in the classroom. Have a good night.